Hey everybody, this is Jon Croft with Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft, and it is another great night for Cultural Warfare. We're enjoying it. We were here last night as well. Are you there with us, Rebecca?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Good.
Here I am.
There you are. All right, let me turn this down. Okay, there we go. All right. So, did you enjoy it last night, Rebecca?
Yes, that was fun. I really liked that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So, we're here tonight, and we talked a lot about Media Moses and what we're about at Media Moses and all this stuff. It's pretty good. But this is Cultural Warfare. We get to talk more specifically here. And so one of the things we're still talking about a little bit is some evergreen issues. I want to get through a lot of these evergreen issues until we get to more news stuff and stuff going on in the zeitgeist. But every now and then we dip our toe into this kind of thing, and this is a little more zeitgeisty. In other words, it's a little more current, but it's also evergreen. So I'll tell you how it's evergreen, but basically it's, why do conservatives keep making bad art? So why do we continue to make bad art? But this is also about why the faith-based community also does this. So you've got a lot of mic bleed coming through, honey.
Oh,
Can you hear it?
nope.
But yeah.
How about I leave and then come back? How does that sound?
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
So yeah, if that mic bleed wasn't so loud, I would not care so much. But there's some kind of it's almost like a radio bleed that comes through. I think part of it's spaces, to be honest. And I think a lot of the reason is because it's on the phone. So there could be phone stuff that just comes from your phone.
Hello, I'm back.
Hello, she's back.
Hopefully it's better now.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said anything if it wasn't so loud.
Yeah.
And I was surprised actually you didn't hear it.
No, I don't. I never hear it. When I left the spaces, it asked me why, and it gave options like that I was having a technical issue, and then it said, "Did you experience echoing?" And they mentioned some other audio problems, so I selected that. So maybe that will help. Maybe other people are experiencing that too.
Yeah, there's a good chance. So yeah, it sounds almost like sometimes it sounds like my own voice repeated, but it's repeated in such a way that I really can't tell that it's me. It almost sounds like a response to what I'm saying, like immediately, like someone's immediately going, "Yeah." Like it's really strange, but then you give a very different response after that. So it's like clearly it's not from you. So it's kind of strange.
Weird.
Yeah. And if it wasn't disruptive, I would just be like, whatever. It just sounds a little disruptive. So anyway, yeah, we're talking about why conservatives and also faith-based media, why do we keep making bad art? And so this is a very deep question. A lot of people like to blow this question off like, oh, they just don't respect the arts, they don't respect culture. And I'm not saying that's not true, but it's a very kind of cursory, surface level response. It's not really engaging in an analysis of why it's really not so good. So there's history here, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that just Hollywood has taken over the arts, and this leads to not only people going to Hollywood to pander politically, which means they end up becoming leftists and no longer conservatives and no longer Christians, but also they tend to, you know, kind of like lose their moorings in the sense of like, you know, not caring in other words, they start to care more about their career essentially than they do their principles.
Yeah.
And they start to pander to this group. And as soon as you start to do that and you start to say, well, it doesn't matter, and I'm just going to work with these guys for money, it's just a job. Well, you've lost your morals, you know, and that's a shame. But there's a lot more that goes into that in Hollywood today. But what I also want to talk about is the fact that, like we have a history in the last 20, 30 years here that is a little surprising, because we should be able to make conservative and faith-based media. Like, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to make it. We have good examples of good art.
Yeah.
So what you're taught when you go to art school, I'm not saying I went to art school, but I know plenty of people who went to art school. In fact, you went to an art school. And I've known other people who go to art school. But also, even just in a high school art class, you get this principle, which is to basically learn from the masters. And so the principle is not necessarily to make your own art first. It's to copy the masters.
Yeah.
And as you copy the masters, then you learn something from the masters. And then that's when you start making your own stuff. And it's not that they don't want you to make your own stuff, because a lot of the reason artists get into art is because they make their own stuff. So it's not that they're going to stop artists from making their own stuff. They want you to, but what they also want you to do is discipline yourself to learning from other artists, and especially the masters. So in any kind of media today, this is true. It doesn't matter who it is. So the fact that you have a lot of conservative and faith-based artists who don't do this is somewhat shocking. And it's almost like they're just willingly, like they're purposely not hiring artists, right? And so this makes it look to me as though these are not artistic ventures. They're not actually run by artists. They're run by venture capital and a lot of other people who are, you know, trying to make an impact, maybe some kind of commercial sort of effort or a money-making effort of some kind.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a business. And this is not shocking. This is true in the film world as well. Like I came out of that world, and I was at AFM, and half the people there I didn't even consider artists. They looked like businessmen, and they were businessmen, many of them. And so, you know, this was not shocking whatsoever. But what we do need to understand is that that's not necessarily a good sign for the culture. So that's not really how culture is made. Culture is made with art and with a lot of these other culturally effective products. You know, holidays can be a culturally powerful, effective tool. You know, these are tools in the culture, and then they create experiences. We have plenty of history of experts, masters in the field. Are you there, honey?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I clearly heard my own voice coming from your speaker.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can, but it keeps making noise.
Okay, I'll leave and join again.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. Wow. This is the worst it's ever been. Because it's loud too. But yeah, it's been difficult for me tonight too because we did this last night, and then I had to be ready for tonight, and I was ready, but I wasn't ready in time. So, and I wrote a bunch of stuff, and so
Hi.
hi.
Yeah.
It's just been terrible. I'm sorry.
I hope it gets better.
Yeah. Um, so, and then I wrote all this stuff, honey, and now I'm all like flustered because, you
Because of
know,
the sound issues.
well, and also I'm not always typically writing for it. Often I'm
Yeah.
just kind of thinking of stuff and then
Yeah.
collecting my thoughts.
Yeah.
And I don't always write a bunch of stuff. Like I don't make a script for myself really.
Right.
Um, and so I just kind of get a main idea, and then it usually goes really well after that.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well, I have some thoughts
yeah, go ahead.
on this topic. You were talking about learning from the masters. So, my mind was just wandering to, who are the masters in this context? Well, assuming, in one sense we're talking about film, the masters would be, the all of the filmmakers, from the 70s and the 80s that were, um, the ones that went to film school, um, that were just doing amazing films.
Yeah,
For instance, Ford Coppola and obviously Spielberg, and um, I'm sure there are plenty really obvious names right now that I'm missing, but
yeah,
that genre, that generation of filmmakers, I tend to think of them as being the masters, and then they have their own masters that they were inspired by.
yep,
Um, and I mean, you could clearly say, like, without really being critical, you could say that Christian and conservative media doesn't appear to be influenced by those masters. um, in fact, it
well, they
doesn't
should
kind
be.
of it feels very much like it's influenced by two things: the cause, which of course is very meaningful, right? We're very passionate about our cause. Um, the evangelicals, conservatives, Christians, it's a very passionate, we need to change the culture, get this message out there.
Right.
But then also it's motivated by like you said, the funding or the money that comes through, or at least that's what it seems like. And so there isn't a ton of that artistry that's eye-catching, that creates, a new classic. That's just not coming through when your motivation is proselytize the right word?
Yeah.
When your
Yes.
motivation is to just um, inform, educate, uh, you know, a culture instead of, um,
Entertain.
well, yes, but even entertain is a tricky word,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like um, mainstream Christian culture loves to throw this word around and use it like it's a bad word. Like,
Yes.
it's bad if you want to be entertained.
Right.
And, but in reality, we're doing ourselves a disservice. Like Jesus was entertaining his followers when he told them parables. Like, they were hanging on his words. They were following, they were tracking with him,
Mm.
and he wasn't saying, like, here's a story of a rabbi, or here's a story of a Sadducee who inappropriately disciplined a shepherd from a small town. Like
Right.
he never told a story like that. His stories were like almost out of nowhere. Like here's this story about like a sheep and a shepherd and like his stories were, people were following along because it wasn't something they were used to hearing. It didn't feel like he was preaching at them. It didn't feel like he was
Right.
trying to just educate them. That he wasn't just, yeah, it felt like, and to stay entertained, we're created with eyeballs. Like, we were created with eyes to look at things, and with a mind to follow a story, to understand a story, and to be drawn to stories. This is just how we're made. In fact, it's really fascinating if you think about it. The language of film is very easily picked up without any explanation. Like, for instance, our 5-year-old was watching something the other day, and he could clearly tell that the character was having a dream. Like, he's like, oh, this isn't real, this is a dream.
Yep.
And no one needed to tell him that. Like, he just knew. So there's something very human about the arts. It's human isn't the right word. It's like the arts is a language that we all speak in our souls. And when you're ignoring that and you're just kind of creating something like, look, here are the rules, here's the a morality story of what's going to happen to you, in the end times, in the tribulation. This is going to happen to you if you don't follow Jesus. It doesn't draw you in.
Yeah.
That's not the language that draws us in. The language that draws us in is the visual language, the human language, the experiential, someone coming into your life and using your life as the story.
Yeah, I mean, how do we know that this is true on a very objective level? Is that God wrote stories in the Bible? I mean,
Yeah.
and they're very engaging. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not boring stories.
No,
We're still
wild.
making them into films today.
Yes.
Um,
And they're not PG. They're not G-rated.
no, they're not. So God is challenging us all to make better stories through His. But, I mean, we have plenty of examples in our history of good stuff. Like, we had people like John Milius, who's a conservative, made good stuff during that era you were mentioning with Spielberg. John Milius was writing some of these films that became famous, like Apocalypse Now and films like this.
Yeah.
And then after that, we had Mel Gibson, who became a director and made some incredible films, Apocalypto and Passion of the Christ and a lot of these other films that Christians love today. So why are we not copying these guys? Why are we not following in their footsteps? Instead, we're making, like, there's this show called The New Norm, which is supposed to be like a comedy, and it just seems very pandery.
Is this a Christian show?
No, this is actually a conservative animation on X.
Okay.
And X is trying to become this platform to also have shows on it, to compete with mainstream stuff.
Wow.
So this is one of the first new shows, and it's just terrible. In fact, I didn't even think it was really made by conservatives. I thought it was making fun of conservatives making fun of Hollywood.
Yeah.
I thought it was that meta. Like, that's kind of how, because Hollywood is smart enough to do that. Like, Hollywood, I could see Hollywood being like, I'm going to make something that makes fun of conservatives trying to make fun of Hollywood and call it conservative. Like, that's what it really felt like. watching. I should show you. You'll see exactly what I mean when I show you.
Is this what you posted? Did you post like a clip of this on your page with the guys in the water crying?
Oh, no.
No, okay.
It's animated. It's an animated show.
Okay, gotcha.
That was totally out of left field. No. But and then I actually think the Daily Wire's comedy stuff is not. I don't know. I'm a little disappointed in the Daily Wire's recent comedy stuff. I actually was not super critical of their Lady Ballers film, but because a lot of comedy is kind of like good, or take it or leave it. But it actually had some funny jokes in it, and but their Mr. Bertram, I don't like it, and they're judged by Matt Walsh. It feels like these shows are like rip-offs of other shows. They don't seem like anything original or interesting. There's not it doesn't feel like there's passion and love put into it, even though that's the claim from both of these shows, that there's just so much passion. But like Mr. Bertram feels like it's from Adam Carolla, like from 30 years ago. Like these jokes do not seem new and fresh. I hate to tell you, but you can't just do that with a script. Especially something like comedy. Like it's just not going to play the same. So what happened to these masters we're supposed to be following? We're supposed to be, what happened to these kinds of filmmakers? Why is like conservative stuff this way, and why has faith-based stuff been kind of like this, kind of clunky and corny? Well, the way I put it is they got caught on their back foot. Like, they're reacting. They're reacting to Hollywood. Yeah. They're on the defense, right? And some people might say, well, so what? You have to defend. You don't understand. No. Have you ever played chess? Does the defender in chess ever win? No, you don't win on the defense in chess. You don't win on the defense in The Art of War. Have you ever read The Art of War? Read The Art of War. You don't win playing defense when you read The Art of War. No, you have to anticipate every move your enemy is going to make in the future. And then you make a move before they make that move. And that move is meant to capture them in the anticipating move that they're going to make. So you have to anticipate your enemy that well. And the only way you can know your enemy that well is to research your enemy. You have to know them really well. In fact, you have to know your enemy better than they know themselves, and better than they know you. So that's what The Art of War says. So you have to understand intuitively your enemy. And so this is also how martial arts works. If you're good at martial arts, you learn a key set of moves, right? And that set of moves has to do with manipulating your enemy into making certain other moves, and then the next move you make is meant to counter that move. So you set your opponent going in a certain direction. That's advanced martial arts stuff. So, but if you want to fight an enemy, that's what you have to do, right? So why are we talking like warfare stuff with commies and left-wing people in Hollywood? If we think that they are a bunch of flouts, like you cannot believe these people are flouts and they don't know what they're doing. No, Hollywood is actually incredibly competitive. So this is what we're not doing. We're not thinking about making media in a competitive way. We're just thinking, well, somebody needs to see this. This is something I've never seen before, therefore it should exist. And I don't see enough stuff like this, therefore somebody should make it, so let's make it. That is not the attitude to go forward with making media. No, I mean, and also these kinds of people who are making media for this reason are probably not even artists. Like I said before, many of these people are not probably artists in the first place.
Yeah.
So artists are giving their life to this. They've been doing it for a long time, right? They have scripts. They have things they're working on. They have stuff that they've been wanting to produce, and they just haven't been allowed to produce it, right? Or it's been corrupted by Hollywood when they did produce it, and so they've lost a lot of their good stuff. The point is that they're professionals, and they need to make more stuff, but the stuff they make now needs to not be a reaction to what we're seeing now. It needs to be created organically as an artist creates, right?
Yeah.
And that's just not what we're seeing. So...
Well, what about inspiration, too? I mean, there's this thing called inspiration.
Yeah.
That Christians, I believe, like, we have the Holy Spirit. This is the inspiration of God. This is God living in us. We can let ourselves be inspired by God to create something. It doesn't have to be a reaction. It doesn't have to be a sermon. Or a chick track, or
I've met some Christians and talked about this subject, and some of them, I really believe that many of them believe that artists are inspired through the flesh. Do you know what that means?
Wow.
Yeah.
Not really.
In other words, they believe that inspiration is evil. And they believe that you're getting ideas from a bad source, as in your flesh or the world or Satan. And they don't believe you're getting that you can get ideas in a good way in the opposite direction. So and so because many of these people are ruled by fear, right? They're seeing bad things around every corner. They're ruled by fear. Because these people are ruled by fear, when the opportunity for godly inspiration does come, they don't see it. So they're running around scared everywhere they go, right? And they're convinced that the devil's out to get them. And even if it's through the artist, the artist is going to make terrible stuff and going to corrupt the minds of our youth. There's so much paranoia and nonsense and fear in so much of the church, that they don't understand that this very same thing can also carry the Spirit of God and be inspired by God. And they don't know how that works either. So oftentimes, all they really do then, and this just, like I grew up in a Pentecostal church. And a lot of people think that's weird or whatever. I don't care what you think. But like, our church... was very structured and organized about spirit-filled worship. Very orderly and structured. We didn't allow weird nonsense stuff. And why is that? Because we actually read the Bible and we actually knew how these things worked. So when you don't know how these things work, you're just paranoid of it and scared of it, running scared. And so when someone's like raising their hands in church or something, you're like, oh, I'm so scared. And so you don't know how these things can be pleasing to God. You don't understand how the manifestations of the Holy Spirit, right, work. And so you're just running scared. Any manifestation of anything spiritual just freaks you out. Like this is not a godly attitude. God doesn't want us to be running scared this way and scared of the manifestations of the Holy Spirit, and not understanding like what godly praise and worship is. And so like what you're seeing is when someone does, when let's say an artist does show up and say this was of God, and they just make some authoritative sounding statement, you just believe them. Because you, again, lack the discernment to figure out which one is godly and which one's not. So I'm not saying these people will never accept the godly side of it, but they're
Yeah.
accepting it for the wrong reasons. They're actually just believing whatever a preacher says. Oh, I can shoot a film. Oh, this is of God. Oh, let me give you my anecdotal experience. None of that's biblical.
Well, speaking of biblical, we have this verse that says, we've not been given a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. That's a verse that most Christians know. Most Christians can get behind that verse and be like,
Yeah.
I know that verse. But listen to this. This is Psalm 45. This is in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 1 says, my heart is inditing a good matter. I speak of the things which I have made touching the king. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. Thou art fairer than the children of men. Grace is poured into thy lips. Therefore God hath blessed thee forever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right there in the Bible.
Yeah.
Like, inspiration is your inheritance in God.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that is that we're not understanding is that, remember I was talking about how Hollywood is competitive. Well, Hollywood is competitive, and the way that Hollywood competes is through outward virtue. It's through appearances.
Yeah.
So if you can fool someone, I'm not saying everyone's fooling everybody, but I mean, that's kind of the name of the game there. But if you can, through appearances' sake, like for appearances' sake, impress a producer, right? And also look very virtuous, and also look very this and that. Be very impressive to some Hollywood producer. Yes, you have to use the virtue signaling that's popular today. But if you can do that in Hollywood, well, you got a game going on. Like, now you're in line to maybe make a picture with somebody. But if you're not interested in that, like if you're not interested in impressing someone visually through appearances, then you're not going to be able to play that Hollywood game very well. And this is why I couldn't play the game very well. I just wasn't interested in impressing you or anybody visually through appearances. Because I'm a Christian. I care about my authentic relationship with people. Like I care about that first with God. So my relationship with God has to be authentic. And springing forth from that, my relationship with all my friends and family and all the people I know has to be authentic. And so when it's not, I don't see the point of trying to maintain this mirage, masquerade, whatever you want to call it, with someone just to make money. Like, that's... Why would I give up my integrity for that? For a few bucks?
Yeah.
And then I have to maintain this lie. Like, the kid that you told don't lose your integrity? Well, that, I believe that, and I'm going to live by that. Like, I'm one of those people who teaches my children to have integrity. Because to fight for a relationship in which you have to lie to maintain that relationship, first of all, that relationship is worth nothing. That relationship will destroy you if it can. Like it'll happily destroy you. Because that's the name of these lying relationships. That's what they do. They destroy authentic friendships. Like anytime you have an authentic thing you want to say to somebody, good luck. So this is a lot of the reason I think that the church, rightly so, doesn't like competition with Hollywood. I couldn't compete with it on that level, right? But the truth is, you don't have to compete with Hollywood based on those terms. You don't have to keep up appearances. You don't really have to do that, even though Hollywood wants you to do that. So what do we have to do instead? We have to be authentic with each other and authentically make good, authentic art. Right?
Yeah.
And so you're doing that from a source of true relationship with God.
Yeah.
So now you're also not trying to impress your fellow believers and saying, oh, I have this great piece of art. Like, no, let's talk about it. What do you think about it? Like, let's talk about what makes art good and bad and mediocre, right? And this is what we're not seeing. So the things we don't like about Hollywood, we're doing ourselves. We're making inauthentic art, right? We're not telling each other that our art is not that good so it can get better. And we're not trying to make it better. And when someone comes to us and says, God told me to make this art, we're like, really? Well, why isn't it good then? God told you to make bad art? Okay. Like, well, why don't we make this art better? Like, why do we have to make it this way? Like, people really have to struggle with these concepts. And I'm not saying you can only put out perfect art as a Christian artist. That's ridiculous because you're not perfect, right? But what I'm saying is that, like, don't go around claiming your art is perfect and God told you all this great, like, oh, you got the greatest art ever. Like, this really does not impress me. Like, it's the opposite. Like, it's actually quite disheartening that Christians, when someone just makes a claim, you just believe it. We shouldn't be doing that. And then they end up putting out this art that's subpar, and everyone's supposed to clap. Oh, this is such godly art. Why is it godly? What makes it godly art? That just doesn't make sense. So what we actually need to be doing is being more competitive than Hollywood. We actually need to be more competitive. And you know how we do that? We stop getting so easily bruised, right, when someone attacks our art and says it's not that good. Stop being so easy to bruise, because what you're doing is tying your ego to your art or tying your spiritual relationship with God to your art. And if someone comes at it, then you start to believe, oh, I must not be a good Christian. I must not have heard God correctly when he told me this art is the best art ever. Like, I'm sorry, I don't think God would be telling anybody that anyway. But even if it was great art, and if God told you that, well, why don't you believe him? Like, maybe it was God. And so when someone attacks your art, what do you care? Right? So, like, if you made good art and it didn't do well, it didn't succeed financially, what does it matter? That's not the point anyway. The point of you making Christian art is not to impress anyone. Right? It's not to make money and impress anyone. So if we are being competitive and honest and authentic as artists, you need to, first of all, check and see what God told you. Like, make sure, right? It's called testing the spirits. So you need to be doing all that stuff. And then you have to be understanding what your purpose is in making this art. And so so this prevents you from mission creep. So that when your art doesn't do well, you realize, oh, it didn't need to do well because that wasn't my mission in the first place. So keep focused on the goal. Understand that the goal cannot be to make money. No. The goal cannot be accolades and Academy Awards. No. The goal cannot be to impress all of your local church members or your family. No. This is never the goal in Christian art. Christian art is always about pleasing God. That's it. That's all. And if you're together with another group of people who also understand that, right, then when you share your art with them, you're sharing the qualities, the authentic qualities of that art with this team, and they can get behind it because they agree, right, that it fulfills that purpose. So if it's fulfilling all that purpose, and you're working together on that purpose, and you're not engaging in mission creep, right, then when you make this art, which is according to plan, right? Outcomes don't matter. So keep making this kind of art and keep trying to refine it and make it better, because that's what we should be doing for the master anyway, right? Like if you're going to do any job for the kingdom of God, why would you do a half-hearted job? Like, don't do that. No. Yeah. When you give your tithes and offerings to God, do you give like, this is the stuff I didn't need? Do you understand that when God gave the law to the Israelites, he was telling them to give their spotless lambs, the ones that were perfect, the best ones, right? So, I'm sorry, but you're not understanding the principle of these laws, and of tithe, and of offering, and of sacrifice, human sacrifice. No, you have to give the best. You have to do your best, right? And it's not about humiliating you, making you feel bad. If it's not the best is your best right now, okay? And so when you can do the best you're doing right now, be proud of giving the best right now. And then what? You're working to make it better. You don't think these Israelites are having more and more sheep, refining their sheep, their fold, getting new sheep and refining these sheep and making them better? Of course they are. So why would an artist not improve their craft? That's just absurd. Again, it's because a lot of these people actually are not artists. They don't want to make their art better. They want to keep the business going, right? It's a business. So they want to keep the business going. It's just about getting another job. Hey, can your producer get another script going through? Oh, okay. Now we've got more work. Is anyone talking about making it better than the last film? Why is that not happening? So these conversations aren't happening, right? Because you really don't have artists in charge of making these pictures. So how do we get more artists? Okay, so here we come to our next stage. How do we get more artists? Well, there's a guy named Marcus Pittman. He comes from Lore TV. He's got a Substack. He was just talking about the SNL model of incubating artists, right? And so he's talking about what conservatives need to make better work. He likes comedy. He talks about comedy. And SNL, right, has been around since the late 70s. And really who he was talking about, right, was not just the artists and the comedians and the writers. He was talking about Lorne Michaels, the creator of this incubator, right? So this is a talent incubator. And so what does an incubator do? It's nice and warm in there, and you're getting the chicks all like, the chicks are sprouting, right? So, right? So this is a good environment, right, for new life to spring forth, right? It's like a greenhouse or something. It's like new life is coming out. Well, why is that? Well, because you've worked to create the right chemistry, the right environment, the right kind of place for what to happen? For what to happen? Artists to make better art, right? That's what we're talking about here. So how do you make an incubator for artists to make better art? Well, first of all, you have to get the proper chemistry. You have to have a competitive environment. They have to be aiming for a goal, right? And so for SNL, because these are comedians, right? They're naturally writers, so it's really a comedian/writer incubator. And these comedians can become natural actors as well. So this is a comedian/writer/actor incubator, which is great. That's awesome. And so what do you have to make better filmmakers, right? Well, I think frankly, Christian colleges could do a good job at this. But there's another place too, which is churches. Churches could also do a good job at this. So, but what they have to do is purposefully make an incubator, right? Which is to provide this competitive environment to make product. And so they also need support, right? So it could be a professor at a college that forms a nonprofit on the side of the school, or it could be the school itself who sees the value in forming this little club or something. But it's got to be like an incubator. That's the purpose of it, right? Is to incubate artists, to incubate directors and writers and producers. And so a church can do this. And I think that the best way for both of them to do it is to try to make short movies. So, because short movies can be fairly cheap, but they're a great place to see what a director can do, right, with an idea, with a basic idea. So I think what they've got to do, right, and this is one thing we talked about a little bit before, honey, yesterday, and I've talked about it a little bit in other places, but yesterday, at least I got to mention that I saw Amazing Grace. Remember I talked about Amazing Grace?
Yeah.
And how that movie Amazing Grace, which is about the abolitionist movement and William Wilberforce and stuff like this in the early to late 1800s, in which they abolished slavery in the UK, right? These are evangelicals. So these guys, what they did was they created art. They created culturally affecting pieces of art. Could be billboards, could be little, protest, moments of protest, or things like this. But these are creative things that they're doing, right? The movie was named Amazing Grace after a song that was created from a man who was repentant for being a slave trader. So this is an amazing story, right? These are amazing stories, and they make great art from these moments. And then we have to spread these things around. If we don't spread these things around, what's the point? Right? It's not just the guy who wrote the song who's talking about his song. It's somebody else. It's William Wilberforce who heard the song, and then he's spreading it around. And these are done in a coordinated fashion. So my point is, these are social issues stories. So what we need is these incubators to have competitions that are for the purpose of making social issue shorts, right? And these issues are about solving a very real problem in the world. So how are they going to do that? Through art. So they need to be competitive. They need to form teams. These teams are about getting a writer-director together with a producer. And then they find a talent who can perform this script. And hopefully they're forming a team underneath them to shoot the script. Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. I think that the talent is really important to get involved early on. I find that that's really effective to do that. But the idea is really to make this competitive environment like SNL, right? In which you have this objective. The thing about SNL that made SNL unique, and a lot of people don't know this, is that SNL is about improv. So if you remember when we went to Smiley's, honey, years ago?
Yeah.
Well, there's something special about improv, isn't there?
Yeah.
Something really unique when you watch comedians and actors doing improv together. It gets really hilarious pretty fast. And you're just seeing these guys in their element, and they know what they're doing. And you can really pick out also a talented person pretty quickly with improv. Um, and and they also just tend to hold on to this joke. Like they could just go really far with it. It's so great to watch. So I think that's what happened with SNL, is that Lorne Michaels were watching these talented artists, these talented comedians rather, performing improv, and he was like, "How do I create this environment every week on a show? Wouldn't that be something?" Well, he figured out how to do it. So that's to me how SNL was born. I'm not saying I read the book. I don't know. I could be totally wrong, but like that to me is my instinct when I look at that scenario, is like, because I've seen actors do that, or I've seen comedians do improv, and it's special to watch. And so when you're really watching it, you're like, man, to like bottle this, put this in a bottle every week would be something special. And so that's clearly what happened. But the thing is that model has to be really respected, and you have to really want to do well in that environment. And so there have to be incentives, right? There has to be some incentive structure to make this competitive spirit more effective, right? So you might need to have some kind of reward system, right? So that they're really competing for something big. And I think that's a great idea. Like, I mean, schools can do this with grades and stuff like this, but like, what can a church do? I mean, but to provide community, like that's a reward in itself. And this is what churches are not doing enough of, is providing community. So I think that they like to have small groups, and that's nice. But then those small groups aren't necessarily exploding out into the larger church and making a larger community, a real larger community. And so these groups need to just become bigger and bigger and more impactful, more effective, accomplishing more goals in the church. And if that's not happening, it doesn't really feel like a real community then. So, but, there's certain rules. And by the way, I really respect Marcus Pittman's opinion on this. I think he's got something there. And we need to support these incubators, and then continue supporting them when they have success. So we just have to continue supporting this kind of effort so that there's success, and then because here's the truth, like we get like really beat up over this idea of competition because we're afraid we're going to be humiliated if we fail, because we know we're probably going to fail at first. Like that's just something that's a human thought. And statistically speaking, it's true. So if you go into a competition, you have to know you're going to fail. But here's the truth. The truth is, generally, when I see these competitions, it's about forming a community. It's not actually about someone getting the number one award and somebody else losing. That's not really what it's about. Yeah, sure, that's a photogenic moment, sure. And you get a little award to put on your shelf, sure, that's fine. But the truth is, what you need to do is just keep competing, right? And as you keep competing, you learn that you get to know more people in that group, and you get to make friendships beyond your team, right? And then you might even become part of a different team later on.
Yeah.
And this is just contributing more to this sense of community, right? And then eventually, even though you might not even be the best director there, the best producer there, whatever, now by this time, let's say it's been a few years later, now you start to make films. And now you're in a crew making films. And you could be making a short film or a feature film or anything. One of these films are going to succeed in some way. And this is what happens. I've seen this happen like quite a lot, actually, when you go through history and you read books about Hollywood and how to make films. A lot of these crew members that come up with the director, they have a relationship now with the director that goes far back, and they've always got a job with them. They've just always got a job with them. And they've started now a new career in a community that's impervious. And it's just going to remain there. And so, like, as you continue to compete and as you continue to work towards these relationships and getting it better and better, the truth is it's not about you. It's not about them. You're just going to continue to make films together. And the success is the community and the relationship. That's what the success is. It's not about winning some award. Like, you got the award of a career by doing that. So, and don't be all precious, that maybe you didn't get to be the primary winner or whatever. That doesn't really matter. So this has always been true with sports as well. We get all wrapped up in knots about who the champion is or whatever. The truth is, it's all just about building into this community, this larger community, and enjoying yourself and having fun. And competition is about making yourself better. It's not about beating someone else. It's never what it's about. It's just about improving your own skills. So you should just keep doing that, whether you win or not. Like, just because it's good to do that as a principle. For principle's sake. Not so you can be like the grand poobah. That's not what it's about. So, like, these are simple principles you teach your children, when they're coming up in sports and they're coming up in any form of competition. They're gonna be tempted to feel hurt by a mistake they made or a failure they made. And you're there to just say, hey, it's about the love of the game. It's about the love of film. It's about the love of this community. That's what it's about. It's not about winning. I'll be frank with you. But if you do win, and you should strive to win, you should try to win. But understand, it's about you getting better, becoming the best AD or AC or director or writer or anything you can be on that set. It's about becoming the best person in that field. It's what you're doing.
Yeah. And I love that you said it's about loving what you're doing. And what you were saying before too about incubating, it's like I would use that word in the sense of like incubating with Christ, like spending time with what you love, spending time with your inspiration.
Yeah.
And letting that be the love. Right? The love is for your God.
Right.
And then from that love will flow the inspiration. And then as you talked about competitiveness, it made me think of how, on a small scale, some Christian artists that I know, like, they become inspired by each other.
Yeah.
Like one of them's making a painting, and one of them is making videos on YouTube, and one of them is, writing worship songs, and it's all very low key.
So cool.
But because they know each other and because they love God, and that love for God is the most important thing to them, the inspiration just flows out. It can't be contained or controlled. It's just
yeah.
It's just, his life in you. He's living, the Creator is living his life in you.
Yeah. And that's what should be happening if you're really an artist, is these things are just going to start flowing out of you naturally, and you're going to be wanting to do cool stuff. But, and that's the last, I guess the last question for me is like, because what I see is not just, I mean, yes, all these things like as we've come to here, many of these things come down to community. And I've said that many times, is the weakness of community makes it so it's hard to make something big happen like art or film or culture. It's going to be next to impossible to do any of those things without community. So community is just it's true, and I'll be returning to this message over and over because it's so important. But our misunderstanding of community, our inability to be gracious to a community and to become part of a community as opposed to standing apart and being too much of an individual and being too much of it's about me and about how I feel about everything. The truth is, just like with a family, you have to show up, be there, not reject just because you don't like what somebody did. You have to just be part of this community, right? And you know, like relax, settle down into your place. You know what I mean? Like, and it's okay to be part of a community. Like, and so like, that's one of the messages I'll keep harping at. But I also hear the practical considerations here of like, well, what do we do a film about? Like, what projects should we be supporting too if we are just supporting a project? So like, what kind of stuff should we be doing? Like, because I know that I said about an incubator, you know, like you should do social issues. Like, what is that? Because Hollywood does that all day. Like, that's what they do, right? Is social issues. So obviously we shouldn't be doing Hollywood social issues. That they're not, you know, like you might agree with them, whatever, but like they're already doing it, right? So we have $1 billion already set aside in Hollywood to do things about their social issues. But who do we have to do our social issues? I hear crickets is what I hear. So like, does that mean these social issues just go away? Because nobody's handling it? Nobody cares? Nobody's going to throw money at it? No, it just worsens. So when a film like Sound of Freedom makes a big hubbub, right, and people get happy and upset and frustrated, and all these feelings, the gamut of emotions comes out of nowhere. Why do you think that is? Well, that's because somebody finally threw some money at this issue, right? The issue is now large enough to where it's like, it really shakes things up. It really moves things because a lot of people didn't even know it existed as a problem, right? And so this problem just continues to get bigger and bigger. And then by the time people notice it, it's like more money in human trafficking than the drug trade. Like for so many years, the drug trade was the worst thing ever. And this has to become the worst problem ever for us to address it. So there are other issues like this as well that we just have not properly dealt with, you know? And so there's a gamut of social issues that conservatives are dealing with, whether it's the environment or whether it's abortion or whether it's, tech. Like there's tech issues like tracking, like like our cell phones constantly tracking us and taking our information. These are issues like our manufacturing, like we don't have manufacturing in our country anymore. Like these are issues. The border is an issue. Illegal immigration is an issue. I could just keep going. Like I could just continue to go. And for each one of these issues, we have 10 films in Hollywood for their issues. Each one of their issues, 10 films. We don't even have a 1 film or 2 films on our side. So these are issues that we really care about because these issues really harm people. So if we have compassion for those people and we want to actually help people, then we need to be talking about these issues. So understand what the kids need, right? So that's number one. I have a list of what stories and projects we should be supporting. One is to understand what the kids need. We can't provide it for them if we can't listen to them. So, the reason I say the kids is because Hollywood is about young people. Why? Because they're about the arts. And so, like, the arts is typically a young person's game. Why? Because things change. Society changes. New social issues crop up. And not just this, but Hollywood is also about tech. Hollywood is a tech industry. Many people don't realize this, right? Tech industries are changing constantly. The arts actually are very often driven by technology. Okay, so if you know the latest technology, you're going to be doing better at making art. So this is a tech field. So understand what the kids need, right? So that means you need to stay abreast of what's going on with the younger generation. You need to understand the issues they deal with. The reason I say that is because I'm a little older. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm a little bit older. I wouldn't call myself old yet. But I've never really felt that old because I pay attention to issues. And sometimes I feel like a Gen Zer, because I'm this is crazy. I'm seeing all this stuff around me, and I'm also paying attention to technology. So understand what the kids need is number one. So you understand their issues, right? And many of these issues are still our issues. They're the community's issues. So care about the community. It's a tech field. Number two, social issues such as abolitionists used. So I was talking about these social issues. So also look at that as a potential inspiration for art. Create the incubators and crowdfund teams. So you have these incubators, right? And they could be run by a church or run by a school, but they could also be an independent group that does things through crowdfunding. So understand that you can do incubators with crowdfunding as well. Do this with small projects first, because small projects are low risk, right? They give people an idea of what you can do. It's also a safe place to fail. So don't feel like you have to make the best film ever. You're just trying to make something better than you made yesterday. You're trying to make something inspiring and that impresses a few people, maybe. Because you really want to impress yourself, kind of like as an artist. You want to be like, that, I've never done that before. That's pretty cool. So start with something small. Maybe raise funds at a crowdfund for a few $1,000s. That kind of thing is very useful. And what's another reason you want to start small? Well, because what I find is that often good projects start small and then they just grow a little larger and a little larger and a little larger, and then eventually they become really big, right? But they often have to start small as a grain of an idea. And so be okay with starting small, and then just continue to build into the same project. And how do you really do that? Why would you really focus on this project? Well, I would understand that even though you might not you might have a passion for this story, script is job one. So you need to make sure this script is really good. And how do you do that? You have to pass it around and get notes from people, from good screenwriters. And so, script is important. You've got to get a good script. After you do that, I would say you need good talent. You need to find some good talent, good actors, and you might have to discover some people. Go to your church play. There's often troupes of actors that perform. And you can find actors sometimes in colleges as well, who are they're actors, but they're also doing something practical, etc. And so you need to seek out often with, to do casting when you're doing casting. So, and then hopefully because of these incubators, once you get the script and your talent, you can return to the incubation team and be like, now we're getting our crew together and making this happen. So, but I find that a lot of people, they just don't have a good script. I think that's really often the weak link is just a really good story. So they need inspiration for what is good storytelling. And so, one list for, that I just wrote today, just for this, I start with the Bible, like as my first bit of inspiration. And I'm often also, even if I want to do a different story than a Bible story, I'm seeking the Bible for inspiration about that story. So like some kind of lesson in the Bible that illuminates the truths of the story better. So you can also find that this can provide subtext to the story you're already writing. So study the Bible while you're writing your script. That's number one. Number two, consider if your script is really not that good. Remember what I said about learning from the masters. Well, we happen to have a ton of public domain work available. And that means you can use the masters of literature for hundreds of years are at your fingertips. Not just the Bible, right? We have a ton of other work, a whole body of work, hundreds, thousands of books that are in the public domain that you can adapt into a script. In fact, if you're not a script writer, I would say this is the best way to get into script writing. Along with studying scripts, good scripts, you're studying how writers write scripts, right? Number two, alongside that is adapting classical works, adapting Shakespeare, adapting other works that are, like if you're a Christian like me, do you know how many incredible works there are in the public domain that are all about the faith? I mean, people today do John Bunyan, right? They do Pilgrim's Progress today. They don't do it very well, but they do it, right? Because that's actually a very difficult work to adapt. Very difficult. So I don't know why we're doing this most difficult thing first, but the Bible can be difficult as well. I understand. Not that we shouldn't do it, but there's stuff. If you're going to do something difficult like Pilgrim's Progress, well, why not Dante's Inferno? Or why not Paradise Lost? Or why not a bunch of other stuff? Instead, we're focusing on the more modern stuff like Tolkien and Lewis, which is not public domain. So you have to pay somebody. You have to pay their estate to use their work. Instead of doing that, why don't you use like the guy who inspired C.S. Lewis and Tolkien? All of his work is public domain. His name is George MacDonald, and he writes not just fairy tales, but he writes dramatic stories as well, which could easily be adapted into like a Western or a drama or some kind of period piece. I've got a ton of them right here. In fact, I ordered some of them. I've got right here, all of this work is public domain. All of it. This is half of the books. And these are only his dramatic works, not his fairy tales. He's got the same amount of fairy tales. Okay? So, These were reprints in the 80s, but he wrote these in like the 1800s. They changed the names, the Laird's Inheritance, the Minister's Restoration. Kind of some cheesy names. That's okay. His original titles, I think, were better. But that's just, those are like $5 paperbacks. I mean, read this, adapt it into a script. You have got incredible writing. I mean, this is like incredible stuff. So, and I'll give you one of them. I don't care. So, like, this is just George MacDonald. Okay, there's other writers as well. And like, I like Paradise Lost. I like this stuff. And so I was actually planning, because I talk about Conwave sometimes, and I was thinking these would make great like westerns, because even though these are generally set in Scotland or England, it's easy. It's the same era, right? And you don't think Scottish and English people are in the U.S.? Come on. So like a lot of the accent is just use the same accent. Bring it to the U.S. Maybe they're going out west. Like, it's interesting. And sure, these are probably period films, and that could cost a little bit of money for the costumes, etc. But like, come on. Like, at least you've got something to work with. And so there's that, right? There's public domain work. Remember I talked about improv? Well, you don't need a script for improv, do you? I've also talked about, in the past, a while ago, I talked about mumblecore. Mumblecore is a genre of film in which you don't need a script for that either. So, but you do need a little bit of experience, and you need some experienced actors. But it's basically improvised kind of dramas, and there's a technique that they use, and I know some of this stuff, but like a lot of people, they're just not skilled enough to do it, and that's understandable. But it's possible to do it, right? So you can also, if you had to, like with C.S. Lewis, like I love C.S. Lewis, so it's like, here, let me grab one. Hey, guess what we have here? We have the Screw Tape Letters. So, oh look, we have the Song of Songs. But I've got an idea to turn this into a short, which is inspired by the Screw Tape Letters, right? So I don't have to take it to make something from it. It can be inspired by. It's good to get approval anyway, but other things you can do is you can do genre work. So genre work is great because it often makes money. And it's true, you'll have to write your own script, and it'll have to be an original script. But, well, not in every case. I mean, I just mentioned how you could turn these into westerns. And that's a genre. It's not always the most money-making genre, which is the idea about genre work, is you want to make something that could make money. So what makes money in conservative and faith-based stuff? Well, a lot of biopics lately. You see biopics. So you're getting the story of a person, right? And you're converting that into a script and shooting it. And there's period stories, there's action, right? So like what's a good, like literally what you could do is kind of like learn from an action genre, like from the past. Like, let's say, kind of like revenge tales, like Dirty Harry or something like that. I've talked about Dirty Harry before, but like, remember how I said that there's social issues that conservatives deal with? Well, one of them is crime. And we were dealing with this issue in the 70s. So there was a resurgence of crime in the 70s. So what happens is Dirty Harry comes around and he says, feel lucky, punk. And he, busts some heads. And instant classic, right? Most of the film is just action where he's beating down some criminals. And there is some social commentary there. And there's, and there's some cool one-liners he makes. But this is not like, it's not Shakespeare, right? It's the point of it is to make a point about crime, and that crime doesn't pay. So, guys, there's plenty of stuff we could be doing that's good. You have to study the masters, right? You have to stop saying things like, God told me to make this story. It's going to be the best story ever. And then no matter how good it is, everybody has to clap and be like, yes, you don't have to do that, okay? You don't have the obligation to do that. Instead, if you want to improve this filmmaker, make them a better filmmaker, actually work with them to make their stuff better, right? And that means telling them when it's not good. You have to do that. You have to be willing to do that. You have to be willing to say, well, this other film was better. This is not meant as an insult, but I think you could have done this and this and this a little bit differently. What do you think about that? Have a conversation, right? Chances are, if the person is a real artist, they're going to be like, I'm learning this, right? Here's what I'm learning. I'm learning this and this and this. Here's what happened. Here's what I'm doing next, right? It's not a big deal. You're improving yourself. Everybody knows we're not perfect people. So that's the beginning point to improving yourself, is recognizing it's not going so good, right? So that's what a lot of people need to realize and accept and be okay with. And then learn from the masters, and understand that sometimes you need to kind of try to copy the masters to do a better job. And then maybe you'll get something that will hit. Like people look at this kind of idea and they're kind of scoffed. They think, oh, why would I take someone else's work like this and make a film from it? Well, I could just make my own script. Do you understand that some of the best directors ever started out by doing things like a Shakespearean film? It's pretty good writing, right? It's adapted from a good writer. It's got a good story that's engaging. I mean, this is good stuff. So, don't look down on it. Understand it's probably written better than you can write. It probably is. And that's okay. So, find a good story that really speaks to you. Work on it. Even if you can't, actually make, screw tape letters, because you don't have the rights. Hey, shoot the short anyway. Do it anyway. You won't be able to make money on it. That's okay. Do it just to do it. Right? This is how artists get their feet wet. They just make stuff, right? And then they work at getting better and better and better. They don't pat themselves on the back every 5 minutes. We need to stop doing that. No. It's not the best stuff. So let's keep making better. Let's keep doing better. Let's keep building our community. Don't be precious about it if you don't get first prize, right? Build your community. Understand that it's not about you, it's about your community. Grow your community bigger. pat each other on the back when they make a better film than you, right? Congratulations, bro. And make a better film next time, because that's just what you do if you want to make films. So let's become filmmakers, guys. Let's actually make good films. And this doesn't just go for film. This goes for writing in general, goes for art in general, music, all of this. This is about community and making better work. Loving on our community. That's what we have got to be doing. So we got to be building these incubation teams, right? Competing with each other. Like Marcus Pittman says, we got to make little SNLs. Okay? So let's do it, guys. What do you think, Rebecca? Are you there?
I'm here.
Does that make sense? Am I crazy?
No. No. It does make sense. No, you're not crazy.
Well, did you like my example of all the books?
Yes. I was picturing them just tumbling out of your bag.
Yep.
And you're passing them out.
I've got lots of
You
them.
get a George MacDonald book.
You get a George MacDonald, and you get a George MacDonald. These are great. I haven't read all of these, but what I have read, I was reading Sir Gibby, and I was just like, this is so good.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
It is. It really is.
All right, well, I guess I'll better wrap it up. It's been almost 2 hours, I think. This might be my longest one ever. It's probably because I took notes. All right, well, we love you guys. And where can people find you, Rebecca?
You can find me at Rebecca Loves Jesus on YouTube and Jesus Loves Rebecca on Instagram. And where can people find you?
Awesome. People can find me here on YouTube, or they can find me on X, or they can find me on Locals. I'm at Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft, or John Edward Croft, or The Media Moses. So, MediaMoses.com. Check it out and stand up for the culture. All right, guys. Love you, and talk to you next week.